welcome to the Spot On Insurance Podcast, brought to you by Insurance Licensing Services of America, ILSA. This is Ted Tavares.
And this is Arlene Tavares coming to you from beautiful Puerto Rico. Today, we'll be taking a closer look at a topic that affects every single one of us.
But before we get started, don't forget to click on the subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode. And now here's our host, Doug Foresta.
Hello and welcome to Spot On Insurance. This is your host, Doug Foresta. Today with me is Chris Boggs. He is the Independent Insurance Agents and Brokers of America, or Big I Virtual University's Executive Director. And today we're going to be talking about the psychology of downed trees, which I am very excited to learn more about. Chris Boggs, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Maybe just the first question I ask you is, what is the psychology of downed trees? Can you say a little bit
Great
about that?
Question. It's more of a PR ploy than anything. No, I'm kidding. Actually, the genesis of the article that we're sort of talking about and basing this podcast on today. Actually, I was doing some research. I'm a coverage guy. I like speaking and talking about and writing about coverages and concepts and contracts. And I was doing some research and looking at the requirements or the insurance requirements of coverage for trees to be removed from a house or a structure after a hurricane or another disaster causes a tree to fall on property. And as I was going through that, I was thinking back through my history in the insurance business and personally as it relates to hurricanes and damage caused by hurricanes. And as I was researching the trees, I was thinking back through things that I have been through and remembering the problems or the psychological effects after a storm and what occurs to the individual who has suffered a lot of downed trees. And that led to the psychology of downed trees and the issues or what they go through, what individual insureds and claimants go through following a storm in recovery process and what it takes to be done with the storm and be able to move past the storm and move on through life. So that's sort of what led to the psychology of downed trees, because I've seen it, again, from a personal standpoint of going through damage myself, but also on the agency side and watched my clients and the process and the steps they went through as the storm was approaching, after the storm hit, and how they processed the aftermath of the storm. And that's what led to the development of the article, and seeing that and in hopes of helping agents prepare if they've never been through it themselves or been through it with clients, to help them prepare for essentially what's about to happen to them in their office and the clients who've suffered damage. And that was the impetus for writing the article in helping agents prepare for what the emotional processes that their clients were going to go through over the days and weeks and months following the storm.
So can you talk about those stages of reaction? I mean, this is definitely a very timely topic.
When you watch the news, you sort of see the beginning reactions. Obviously, we have the situation where when they're interviewing people right after the storm, right after they've lost their house or car or whatever they've lost, and the first thing they say is, well, we're just happy to be alive. Unfortunately, that stage doesn't last very long. But to answer your question, there's actually the American Museum of Natural History had an article entitled "The Psychological Effect of Emergencies," upon which I based some of my writing in the article. And they broke it down into 6 stages. They had the warning stage, the impact stage, the action stage, the honeymoon stage, the inventory stage, and the recovery stage. Well, I like to take things a little bit more simplistically than that, so I actually reworded it to what I would call the 5 R's of natural disasters, just sort of help me remember it. So I looked at it and I put it into the rough stuff. That's when the storm hits. That's when the bad stuff starts happening. And then you have the relief stage. That's when all things are good. We're just happy to be okay. We're lucky to be alive, that stage that we were just talking about. And then you have the reality stage. That's when the full effect of a storm begins to be realized. My home is damaged. My home is destroyed. I've got all these trees on my house. My stuff is gone. My house is flooded. I don't have any transportation to get to work. We don't have anything anymore. So you hit this reality stage, and when you hit the reality stage, then you hit the reaction stage. And generally the reaction stage tends to manifest itself in anger, especially on the insurance side, in what the agents are going to be hearing. And once we've gone through the reaction stage, we have the recovery stage. But what's fascinating is how quickly we move from relief to reaction to the anger on the insurance as what we see on the insurance side within the agency side of the business. Because when I went through it my first time on the agency side of the business, when my insureds would call to report that they had a loss, the first question I would always ask, because I was interested, they're my clients, is everybody okay? And they were in the relief stage. Yes, everything is good. And when they have that realization that everybody's okay and the relief, they're sort of calmed a little bit about that. But now they've got the reality. And once the reality hits, they all of a sudden turn to anger very, very quickly. And it was amazing on the agency side how quickly it went from relief, we're okay, we're just letting you know we had something happen, to nobody's calling me, nobody's giving me money, nobody's coming out to look at anything, when are you going to get here? And the transition was very, very quick when we had a communal disaster situation. In just about any disaster situation, from a personal disaster situation, my house burns down, or I suffer a major catastrophic loss personally, you're going to see these same steps. But they seem to move through quicker when it's a natural disaster, when there's a communal, as I call it, a communal disaster, when a lot of people are affected. And I'm not trained in psychology, so in my article I sort of postulated the reason for that is because it's not just me that's hurting anymore. Now it's my neighbors, people I know, my friends, my family. Everybody is being affected by this. And so my anger sort of wells up because I'm watching everybody else in pain. I'm watching everybody else not getting helped. I'm watching everybody else going through this with me. If it's just me, as I sort of mentioned in the article, I sort of feel like I'm just feeling sorry for myself. And my parents never allowed that. But if it's everybody, my anger is justified, and I get there a whole lot quicker. At least in my mind, my anger is justified. And I get there a whole lot quicker because I see everybody hurting, and I see nobody, in my mind, I don't see anybody being helped by the government, the insurance industry, or whatever. So it turns from the reality of I don't have stuff anymore, or my stuff is damaged, to you're not helping me. Nobody's doing anything. I'm in this on my own, as are my neighbors and as are all my friends and family. We're all seem to be on our own now because nobody's helping us out. So the transition from relief, I'm happy to be alive, I'm lucky, everybody's okay, physically we're all right, to the reaction of anger tends to occur very quickly on the natural disaster side, more so than an individual disaster. As I said, my house burns down or something along that lines. So we go through those stages pretty quickly to get down to the anger side. And then we have to get to the recovery side. And that obviously is the longest part. Now, recovery is not just financial. We get paid from the insurance company, or we get paid from the government, or whatever the situation is. So we have the recovery stage from a financial standpoint, the physical standpoint, where we get our house back, or we get our stuff back, or we get a new car, or whatever was damaged, we get that back. The financial and physical, although it still might take days, weeks, or months, depending on what it is that was lost, that can get done on a relatively quickly basis. The mental recovery can take a whole lot longer. And as I recount in my story, I take it back to Hurricane Hugo, which occurred in 1989 when I was in college, and Hurricane Fran, which was the first major hurricane I went through on the insurance side of the business, on the agency side of the business, in 96. And Hurricane Hugo, in Charleston, all the way up to the Charlotte area in South Carolina and to North Carolina, thousands and thousands and thousands of trees were lost. And for months and months afterwards, you heard chainsaws. As I mentioned in the article, actually one of the local radio stations in Charlotte, the largest radio station in the area, had a song recorded called Chainsaws. And they did it to the Rawhide sound, the opening to Rawhide, the TV show Rawhide from the 50s and 60s, I believe. And it was intended to make it a little bit lighter. You got all these chainsaws and you're going to hear this noise. But it always reminded people of what they had just been through. And as I mentioned, even my dad, when he hears chainsaws now, he remembers Hugo. When I hear chainsaws, I remember Hurricane Fran because of all the work we had to do to get the trees cleaned up. And the recovery doesn't actually occur and completely until you stop hearing those noises, if you will. I don't want to compare it to PTSD type situation, but it's sort of the same thing. It's a reminder of what you have been through.
Spot on Insurance is sponsored by ILSA, Insurance Licensing Services of America, America's premier licensing and regulatory compliance experts. To learn more about ILSA and the services they provide, visit ilsainc.com. Well, in terms of what agents need to be thinking about with these various stages and of course interacting with people, I know you talk about the desire for understanding and emotional support as well as professional service. Would that apply to one stage more than another?
I think it tends to apply. That's a great question. I think it tends to apply when you have the first conversation from the relief to the reaction to the recovery. I think it sort of plays in to those three stages from the insurance coverage standpoint. Now, obviously, as an agency on the beginning side, when you receive the warning and everything else, you can start telling your insurers these are the things that you need to do to help protect yourself from damage. But once the damage has occurred and once the storm has passed, that's when the agent really has to get into the go mode, really has to start doing what is necessary to help their clients get as quickly through those stages as possible. So one of the hardest, or one of the, not hardest, but one of the worst parts of the recovery phase, the recovery and reaction phase, is not knowing what's going to happen. And that creates and deepens the anger, because if you're not telling me anything, if I don't know anything, I am completely out of control. I'm to some degree out of control, have no control now. But if I just don't know what's going on, I truly have no control of anything that's going on in my life. I am at the mercy of everything going on around me. So as agents in helping their clients with information and knowledge, as I mentioned, not just about insurance. Obviously, you need to be able to explain to them insurance and explain to them that this is what the process is going to be, because a lot of people may not have ever been through a catastrophe or any kind of claim situation. So you're going to have to be patient, and the agent's going to have to explain to them the process. Here's what we've got to do. Here's what's going to go on, and here's what the estimated timing is. So we have to be able to give them the information they need as an agent to their client, saying, here's what you need to expect. And you also have to be able to give and understand that you need to give bad news early. Because if you withhold the bad news, it's only going to be worse later. Because if you don't tell me that something, and from an errors and omissions perspective, you don't necessarily say right up front you have no coverage for that. Because there's possibility that there's something that you don't know about the situation where they might have coverage. But if it's a situation where you know they didn't have flood coverage, you got to tell them you did not have flood coverage. Don't get into the argument and debate at that point, but they've got to know up front what the situation is from an insurance perspective. Here's what coverages do, here's what coverages don't do. And because one of the most common things you're going to hear from clients is, well, my neighbor got paid for that. Well, your neighbor might have a different. They might have a different
policy than you, right? And different coverage.
Exactly. They don't necessarily have the same thing you do. So it's not a one size fits all. And I don't want to necessarily denigrate any particular, but people who buy online and make phone calls as opposed to talking to an agent might not have the coverages they need. And there are a couple of ads out there that make that point, that you unless you talk to somebody and they have a chance to analyze your exposures, you might not have the coverages you need. And I'm not going to make mention of the companies that do that, but I'm glad that they do. Because to your point, just because your neighbor got paid for it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get paid for it, because you might have a different endorsements, or they might have different endorsements than you. And so the agent needs to be prepared for that phone call, and also prepared for, hey, why isn't anybody here? Well, to tell them, well, there are hundreds of thousands of people who've had damage doesn't make them feel better in any reality situation. What you need to be able to say is the CAT team is down. They're holed up they're staying at this hotel. They're going neighborhood by neighborhood, or whatever the situation is. But you've got to get the intelligence of what's happening with your carriers. Where are they, and what are they doing, and when should they expect to see somebody? How quickly should they expect to see somebody? So you really need to, as much information as you can possibly give from the claim standpoint and the coverage standpoint is necessary to help your clients regain some level of control. Again, because if I don't know, I am truly out of control. I have nothing on which to base what's going to happen to me. and I'm sort of just spinning around in circles and don't know what's going on. Give me
and
some
you do
control.
talk about, too, you also talk about the importance of understanding that for at least for some of these people, it may be their first experience with disaster, right?
Yes. And if they've never had any other type of claim, they really have no idea what the process is going to look like. Now, it's important to do that with any claim if somebody's never had a claim, to explain to them what the process is going to look like. But especially, as I mentioned, when you have a community situation where they're seeing everybody in pain, they need to understand what's going to happen to them. But the other side of that, of what agents need to be able to explain to their clients, is things outside of insurance. Here's where you go to get water. Here's where we understand that there's, again, fuel for your generator, whatever they have. The agent is going to get a lot of phone calls from the same person over and over again. Again, because they're looking for some element of control in their life. They're looking for information. And if the agent's prepared for saying, hey, here's where we understand there was fuel available, here's where we understand there was water available, and here's where whatever, become that point of information as a service to the community. And one of the things the agent obviously is aware of, this is about service to the community. This isn't, obviously, and I hate to say this isn't PR, this is about servicing your community, period, at this point, because everybody's hurting. And the independent agent is there to help people in time of need. And that's more than just insurance. That's information. So that's one of the things that the agent needs to be prepared for, knowing that they're going to have anger coming their way, even if there's nothing they can do about it, but you can be prepared for it and you can be able to answer the questions. It's about information. It's about being able to respond as best you can. Some questions you may not have an answer to, but you need to be prepared for the questions coming and the fact that people are going to be hurting and angry. And sometimes that anger just needs someplace to go. And sadly, you might get it even though you have no fault in that as the agent. So that's sort of what I want the agent to be prepared for, is what's coming their way and what they need to do to be ready for it and how to respond. So as I sort of ended the article, I talked about be ready for it, be patient, be knowledgeable, and be available. And that's your job as an agent, to do all of those things, to be the point of contact, to be a source of information. And
well, I'll tell you, this is really important and timely information for agents. My guest today has been Chris Boggs. He's the Independent Insurance Agents and Brokers of America, Big I Virtual University's Executive Director. Let's also give people, can you let people know, I know that this is based, as you said, on an article that you wrote. How can people access that blog, and then how can they learn more about the Big I and about you?
Okay, well, as far as it goes with the Big I, you can obviously go into the Big I website, which is the independentagent.com, www.independentagent.com. Now, as the virtual university, that's obviously one of the subsidiaries of the Big I of America, the Independent Insurance Agents and Brokers of America. And the virtual university is available to all Big I members. And the article that I wrote that we're speaking about, The Psychology of Downed Trees, is available on the virtual university section of the website. So that's one of the ways they can just go to Independent Insurance Agents to the Big I website. They can click on virtual university and look under articles, under miscellaneous, if you will, for Boggs on downed trees, if you will, is sort of how they can get to it. And the virtual university obviously is the education arm of Big I. So we spend most of our time either doing webinars, or I'll be speaking at various state association meetings or company meetings about various insurance topics across the country. Just returned from a 10-day trip to Atlanta, Des Moines, and Billings, Montana. So we're out and about and speaking on all different types of topics as it relates to insurance. Mostly I speak on coverages and concepts and things along those lines.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on today. And like I said, I mean, this is such an important, and as of this recording, sadly timely event, and as you were saying, we were chatting a bit before that every 4 to 5 years this kind of comes to the forefront. So Thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your words of wisdom. I greatly appreciate it.
Well, I do appreciate you having me.
Thank you.
By the way, our show notes and bonus resources can be found on spotoninsurance.com. Subscribe now so you don't miss a single episode.
Thanks for joining us.